Hello and welcome to Carnivore Wellness. I'm Rebecca, and today I'm going to be answering a question. Can I eat a carnivore diet if I don't have a gallbladder? The answer is yes, but first let's start with what is the gallbladder? What does it do? How does it relate to our diet and digestive functioning? So the gallbladder is a small contractile sac located below the liver, and it contains bile. So bile is produced in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and is then secreted into the duodenum, or basically the start of the small intestine, whenever we eat fat with our meals. So you can imagine on a high-fat carnivore diet, it is important to have an understanding of where this bile is coming from and if it is able to be produced in high enough amounts for you to adequately digest the incoming nutrition that you are giving your body. And the result for most people is that over time, yes, your body will upregulate the amount of bile produced by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and released into that upper portion of your small intestine, the duodenum, in enough amounts that you are able to adequately digest fat. However, that may take a little bit of a time period of transition for some people, as the body needs to kind of dial that up, considering that many of us come from a background of low-fat diets. For years, we've been told to stay away from fat and that dietary fat is bad for us. Well, those of us who have entered into this realm of discovering the benefits of a carnivore diet understand that that is not true and that indeed the body needs fat to function. Fat is the building blocks for all of our cells, in that we have, a bilipid layer making up the membranes of all of our cells. That's made of fat. All of our hormones are derived from the cholesterol backbone, fat. So we need this fat, and we need to make sure that our bodies are able to adequately digest and process the dietary fats that we take in. Sometimes folks, for some reason or another, have had their gallbladders removed, usually because of a frequency of recurring gallstones, or they've had, a gallbladder attack, some kind of intense pain that led to a doctor recommending removal. So what happens in that case for those individuals is the gallbladder itself is removed. However, the liver still continues to make bile, and it will store that bile in the common bile duct. There is a duct that leads both from the liver and the gallbladder to that duodenum space in the upper portion of the small intestine, just below your stomach. So what happens for those who have had their gallbladder removed is that common bile duct will expand over time and create a pseudo pouch that will then store the bile in a bolus, or basically a quantity of fluid or material that will then be released into, the duodenum as fat comes in. Now, the body is really smart and, of course, uses hormones to communicate most all functioning throughout the body. So when we eat fats and cells in the duodenum sense fat, then it releases a hormone called cholecystokinin, and that is secreted, and that then triggers the release of bile from the gallbladder or that common bile duct into the duodenum, so that will then help break apart the fat, and then the fat is further broken down by more lipase enzymes, proteins that are designed to break apart those fats for nutrients. So that's kind of a little overview of the gallbladder and the role that bile plays in breaking down fats. Now, it's really important that we are able to break down our fats, because that's where we are getting the bulk of our nutrients and our energy, especially on carnivore. As mentioned, when we come from low-fat diets, that can lead to a downregulation of that production of bile and the release of that bile. Think about it. If you are not consistently eating high-fat meals, then your duodenum cells are not triggering that release of that hormone, that cholecystokinin, to release the bile. So without that stimulus, the bile just stays in the gallbladder or stays in that common bile duct if you've already had your gallbladder removed. And when you transition into a carnivore diet and you start increasing your intake of fats, you may notice some discomfort around the gallbladder. And some people, they get signs and symptoms that they're not digesting fats well. That could include things like not being able to tolerate fatty cuts of meat, or that, they are constantly running to the bathroom in the early days with, very loose and frequent stool. And that is common throughout, for most carnivores as they transition. So if that's happening, it doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong, but it is an expected part of that transition process as your body works to upregulate that production of bile and the regular secretion of that bile when those fats are sensed in that portion of your small intestine. So in doing that, the body is giving you what you need to be able to break it down. It's gearing that bile up. However, it can take some time. And for those of us who've had our bile sitting in our gallbladder not being stimulated, sometimes that leads to pain. Sometimes that can even lead to the formation of gallstones. Basically, the bile gets really sluggish and kind of clumped up. Think about if you haven't run your garbage disposal or something on your sink and you've just got more little bits of material going in, and yeah, things can still kind of flow through a little bit, but it really does get backed up and stuck. So that can lead to issues and some pain. And in those cases, always go see a doctor or seek medical treatment. We are very fortunate to live in a day and age where we do have access to medical interventions when we start to have things like that happen. So always, if you have any concerns, consult with your doctor or trusted physician, please. That said, they may want to put you on some kind of medication that is designed to help break up those gallstones. Worst comes to worst, the doctor needs to remove your gallbladder due to severe inflammation or whatever the case may be. That is okay. It's not ideal, but that is okay because your body can then adapt. As we mentioned, that common bile duct will expand and serve as the reservoir for holding that bile until it is needed. Now, for those who are coming to the carnivore diet without a gallbladder or just with poor gallbladder functioning, there are a few things that you can do to make sure that you are helping your body adjust. And those things would include having smaller meals, more frequent meals. Oftentimes on carnivore, there's a lot of push for people to do, 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day. And that's all fine and dandy for the people that works well for. But if you don't have a well-functioning gallbladder, then perhaps you need to start slow and give your body smaller amounts of food, which equates to smaller amounts of fat at a time so that the body is able to produce the bile, release the bile, and allow that fat to be broken down so that the nutrients can be fully absorbed. There's no point in taking in extra amounts of fat and nutrients if you are just unable to process it and it's going to come right back out the other end. So just be mindful of that. You might need to have smaller meals. And, same sort of thing with folks who have had any kind of bypass surgery or like a gastric sleeve. The smaller, more frequent meals are really helpful for those who want to ease into this. The body just isn't able to take in larger amounts of food, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that you can't do carnivore. You absolutely can. Just tailor those meals to match what your body is able to do as far as digestion goes by making those smaller. Also, you can dial back the fat. We as carnivores, we love to promote the fatty meat, the pork belly and the ribeye and the brisket. And those are great, and you will likely get to a point where you can tolerate those cuts of meat with the higher amounts of fat very well. However, when you're first starting, you might need to rely on leaner cuts of meat, things more like your sirloin or a higher percentage ground beef, maybe something more like 90-10. So just be mindful that you might need to dial back some of the fatty cuts of meat and instead go with the leaner cuts to just help you as you transition. The other thing you can do is you can use some digestive enzymes and supplements to help your body along with that process of breaking down the fats. We've talked about how your body will upregulate that production of bile and its release over time, but that takes time, and you may want to go ahead and start enjoying a carnivore diet for the myriad of health benefits that conveys. So you can do things like supplement with lipases. We mentioned those earlier. Those are the enzymes that are designed to break down fat. And then you can also use something called hydrochloride supplements. I believe the name comes under betaine hydrochloride, betaine, betaine hydrochloride. And I would recommend getting, they sell those tablets into like up to, I think, 500 milligrams. I would go with a smaller amount of milligrams for that tablet. You will be able to taper down the amount that you need to help you adequately digest. So instead of having, a big old supplement, that's in a high amount and having to later split pills, instead just get the smaller amount and try and take only the amount that you need. You don't want to take it in excess because you want your body to, in some ways, have to stretch a bit and have to upregulate that production, so that you then are not reliant on these supplements and these enzymes for, the duration of carnivore. Very unlikely that, people do transition out of needing those, but it can be very helpful for those when they first start. And the other thing you can consider if you want a more natural, nature's answer to this is supplementing with ox bile. So it's literally the bile from an ox, another animal. So if you are, very much in line with wanting to keep everything that you put into your body animal-based and carnivore friendly, that would be a great option. It may not be as effective, but I do think it is still a great way to increase your body's ability to break down fats initially, especially if you're really struggling with that and having continuous digestive issues, or if you're having any kind of, just discomfort. Maybe perhaps after you eat, you feel really full or like really kind of nauseous. That could be a sign that your body is not able to break down those fats. So consider supplementing with any of those. Some lipases, the betaine hydrochloride, or ox bile. Those are all options on the table. Of course, plenty of carnivores say you don't need to supplement, and by and large you don't, once the body is up and running and functioning well, and kind of at a place of homeostasis and maintenance. But until there, it can be helpful to have some of these supplements, to help you along the way. Again, any questions about that? Talk with your doctor or trusted physician. Don't take my word for it. As a disclaimer, I cannot tell you to go take supplements. I cannot, tell you that you need something. So just throwing that out there, use your best judgment. This is just some information to help guide you and point you in the right direction and help you perhaps have a better idea of what questions to ask and what answers that you might be looking for. Okay, for this last little bit, I want to talk about my own experience with my gallbladder, because I've had a few different times in life where I experienced firsthand what that sluggish gallbladder and the sluggish production and release of bile felt like and presented like. In my first instance, I did check with a doctor. I'll fill you in on what that looked like. I had just gotten back from hiking the Appalachian Trail. During that time, I was eating so many carbs. I was just kind of eating Little Debbie snacks, terrible food choices. But I knew that coming back out of, a period of time where I had been exercising a ton, hiking 20 to 30 miles a day, I knew that if I continued to just return to my sedentary life and eat as I had been eating on the trail, that I would quickly, start to gain excess fat. So during that time, I dipped my toe into the keto pool. I did not fully commit. I did not, do it for any length of time, but I had a couple of days where I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to try this ketogenic diet. And, without arming myself with enough information, I just kind of attempted to do that. So I essentially was making, scrambled eggs and sauteed spinach covered in coconut oil. I don't recommend this, but I did that. So I had several high fat meals over the course of, a week or so, off and on. I was never really sure if I wanted to commit to keto or not, but I did during that stretch of time have several high fat meals, mostly with the fat coming from coconut oil. And within a few days, I started experiencing intense pain in my gallbladder. I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't make the correlation at the time, but it was a really sharp pain, and it occurred, I want to say 3 or 4 times, enough to where I felt this is not right and I need to go seek a medical professional's opinion. So I did. I went to the doctor. They set me up to go have a gallbladder scan. They scanned my gallbladder. I was wondering, am I going to be one of these people who has to have my gallbladder removed? What's going on? Well, all was fine. They said, your gallbladder's fine. You probably just had, some stress on it. Well, absolutely I did. I was eating these high fat meals, and my gallbladder was having to, suddenly work, and that common bile duct that releases the bolus of bile into the upper small intestines, that duodenum region, it was really sluggish. It was trying to move some of that through. And so that's where that pain was coming from, or at least that's how I have come to see it now. So, the high fat meals, especially when you're not used to the high fat, it will lead to, you might have to overcome a period of time with that sluggishness. Again, don't ignore pain, especially if you feel like it is something that needs to be addressed medically. Let me emphasize that. But I'm just letting you know that was my experience. It's kind of common. So if that happens to you, maybe perhaps that'll just give you the information to know that that's what's going on. All right, and then two other things that I want to talk about. And this one's a little icky. Guys, we can't really talk about transitioning to carnivore without circling back to poop talk, okay? Especially when it comes to digestive issues. So here we go, poop talk disclaimer, it's coming up. When I first started a ketogenic diet, I did a ketogenic diet for about 5.5 months before I transitioned to carnivore. And during that time, I still struggled with cravings and whatnot. And I still, I've come from a background of binge eating behaviors and, emotional eating and whatnot. So there were times where I would binge on keto-friendly foods. Those keto-friendly foods were very high in fat. Most often, it was the macadamia nuts. I couldn't stop eating them. I'd open the bag, I'd get just a really small handful, but I would keep going back until pretty much the whole bag was finished. Well, that results in a lot of fat having to go into my digestive system. Those macadamia nuts are very high in fat, which is what makes them a great keto food. Not ideal. Plants they're not ideal. Y'all know that. But in doing so and in getting that high fat, I noticed my poop turned a very light color. That was a little concerning. I immediately Googled it. What does it mean if you have white or tan stool? Poop is normally brown. We all know that. And what I found out is that basically that white color is a result of your body not releasing enough bile in the digestive process. And so, yikes, that's a little concerning. What is happening with, my gallbladder yet again? I was having that sluggishness. The body wasn't used to those high amounts of fat, especially all at once. It occurred after binges, not necessarily with regular eating intervals where I was having appropriately sized meals, appropriately portioned amounts of fat in my meals. Instead, it was after I had been unable to control those cravings and those urges to binge eat. So it was a ton of fat hitting my system. No wonder my body was not geared up to process all of that fat at once. And so I had the white stool then. And it was a little concerning. I kind of knew to keep an eye on it. But I also understood at that point, I'd been doing a lot more research with this go around with keto. And I understood that, it's the high fat and I probably just don't have quite enough bile being produced to help break down those fats appropriately. So it was definitely a signal for me to dial back the fats at that time. It's one thing I recommended earlier, dial back the fats and give my body time to progress. Again, if you're concerned, consult with a medical professional. The second time that I experienced that, white or light colored stool was a few months into my carnivore diet journey. 5.5 months after keto, I was relatively fat adapted. I think my body had definitely been gearing up and was better equipped to process fats. But then I went carnivore, but I was still eating relatively lean carnivore foods when I first started. I was mostly eating ground beef and eggs. So I hadn't really upped the fats to such a great extent, but I did start doing that process. I knew, you hear time and time again, you need to increase your fats. That's where your body's deriving energy and getting the building blocks it needs for hormone production. So I leaned into that and I started including, a lot of butter and whatnot into my carnivore meals. And there was a period of time, it only lasted maybe a day or two, maybe one or two occurrences, but my stool was very light in color, like white to tan. And I realized, I might be overdoing it on the fats because here again, this is my body's sign of saying I don't have enough bile to process the amount of fats that are coming in. Now, granted, at that time, I really was eating an excessive amount of fat. I wanted to expedite the healing process. And unfortunately, we have to be patient with our bodies. We have to wait for our bodies to catch up with our mindset, especially when we're ready to go full bore carnivore. But the body needs time to, allow those feedback mechanisms to upregulate things like our bile or our lipase enzymes and just our body's ability in general to derive nutrients from the food we're giving it. So those are my experiences around my own gallbladder issues. I'm not surprised I had them given that I grew up eating and enjoying a standard American diet. Very low in fat. Fat has always been demonized. I never had fat be a large component of my plates, and it makes sense that I had some of that sluggishness that led to pain and really, required me to go get it checked out by a doctor. I'm glad I did that and followed up with that. And then also, seeing that white to light colored tan stool was another sign in both those cases that, you know what, you're eating too much fat. Fat is good, but you're eating too much. You got to dial it back a little bit. And so I did that in both of those cases. Now, I can eat plenty of fat. I don't have any issue. I have not seen a return of the white to light colored stool. I don't get gallbladder pains anymore, but I'm well over a year and a half into carnivore at this point. So I'm not surprised. I've given my body time to upregulate everything and meet me where I am. So just wanted to share that little bit of my own personal experience in the hopes that it helps you, or, provides you with a little bit of a better understanding of what you might experience. Or if you find yourself in that place where you're looking in the toilet and thinking, oh my gosh, why is my stool this color? Well, now you know. It's from, your gallbladder not producing enough bile. So all to say, we need our gallbladders, but if you have had yours removed, that's okay. Your body is so well adapted to continuing to help you thrive that even if the doctor takes that gallbladder out, that common bile duct will expand and basically create a pseudo sac that serves as a gallbladder and contributes to that same functioning of holding that bolus of bile and then releasing that when it's appropriate. So you're good to go. You just need to start slow. Start with the small, frequent meals, dial back the fat if need be. And if you want to supplement with some of those supplements we talked about earlier, you're welcome to try that as well. Again, this is a medical issue, so take up any concerns or issues with your doctors. I just have to be very clear about that. All right, thank y'all so much for joining. If you want to continue to connect with fellow carnivores, if you want to talk about your experiences, if you want to come talk about having white poop on occasion, you are so welcome to come over to the Carnivore Wellness community where we get together, fellow carnivores, meat-based eaters. We're talking about our experiences, our stories, sharing words of encouragement and support. Our meetings serve as a great source of accountability and, just lifting one another up as we progress in this way of eating. There's a free portion of the platform where you have access to an entire e-course that will help you get started on the carnivore diet with confidence, with a plan, knowing exactly what to do, and lots of complimentary resources there as far as recipes and meal plans and grocery lists go. And then in addition, we have a monthly commitment membership where you can sign up and you gain access to weekly meetings. We hold 3 meetings a week. They're essentially group coaching sessions, accountability sessions where we get together and chat on Zoom and, share what's going on in our lives and in our carnivore journeys. And we also make sure to, give a little extra attention to the personal growth and development side of what is occurring alongside this significant lifestyle change. Our dietary changes don't happen in a vacuum. It ripples out into every aspect of our lives. And the Carnivore Wellness community is here to serve you in that full picture, that full scope of your life as you work towards becoming the best version of yourself possible in optimal health and healing. So I'll put those links down below so that you can come join, check that out. We'd love to have you there. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you found this helpful, entertaining, or if you want to make sure that you don't miss anything else coming up, please like and subscribe. I appreciate that. And I will see you next time.